Information needed.
Good.
There we go.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. And if you're in the here and now, welcome as well. This is Grant Cameron, and I have a special guest today. I'm going to learn something new today. I am joined today by Kathleen Covalt, and she's an educated person, and she's got a sort of a thing I've heard a little bit about. But she's going to do a PowerPoint presentation for us, and then I'm going to have some questions. And we may actually get some insight into reality and how it works and what's going on here. Good evening, Kathleen. How are you doing?
Hello, Grant. So happy to be here with you.
Beautiful. Okay, so let's start with your background, and then maybe a little bit about your encounter with Desta. Now, Desta is a lot more knowledgeable than I am about all sorts of paranormal stuff. She sort of knows everything about everything. And so I assume that you and her were talking about this, and she wanted me to sort of get this on tape, and she thought it was important. I did a little bit of background work on it, and this is the rainbow body stuff. So let's start with, give me a little bit about your background and how did you get into this sort of odd subject that really, I guess a lot of people really aren't into. People are into disclosure, they're into all this kind of stuff, but let's see where you came from on this thing.
Sure. So all the way back in the 1980s, I went for a master's degree in counseling. It was at University of Notre Dame. And while I was there, I realized I was psychic. I knew things about my clients that I didn't know how I knew. They were going through issues in the here and now, and I had an idea about what might have occurred when they were a child that was related to the issues that were sort of ongoing with them. And if we went back to those sort of original traumas, let's say, we could really help heal the person quickly and even, more thoroughly, let's just say. But I didn't feel like I wanted to go the traditional route after that, because I felt like I wanted to talk a lot and tell them what I felt and, see if, it made sense to them. And that wasn't really how traditional counseling is done. So I decided just to get a million other different types of jobs. But while I was doing that, I started researching all this kind of metaphysical and spiritual literature because I wanted to understand, how do I know? And I don't know how I know and what's going on. And that led me eventually. I got back and I went for my doctoral degree in educational psychology because I went to a school that had a program on transpersonal psychology, which is like one of the only kind of psychologies that takes in sort of the spiritual element, at least the way I wanted it. And so I was reading all that great research. And then my husband and I got married. We moved to the Hudson Valley of New York. And I met these great people, and they were running a support group for experiencers. And the whole UFO world opened up before me because every month I would go to these support groups with my husband, and people from the town and from all over would come and tell their stories, because this was around the year 2000-ish now. And it was still way more stigma than there is now. And so people were being laughed at, or they felt afraid to tell people, whatever it was. But this was a safe place for them to tell their stories, all different kind of stories. And so I learned the truth of the people's experiences. I had a counseling background. I'm intuitive. I could feel the genuine emotion when they were retelling their experience. So I knew for sure something was going on. And then I don't know, Grant, if it was like 2003 or whatever, I was following you. And I was hoping you were going to be at the Ozark conference in Eureka Springs. And my husband and I went out there, and you had a problem with getting across the border that year. Oh, yeah. And so so I'm finally meeting you 20 years later.
Yeah.
It's like such a thrill for me. And so I've been into all of these topics, Grant, because I know I have had a million experiences that the current way we understand reality doesn't explain. And yet I know the truth of them. And then I've met a million people in what I do. I also do intuitive card readings and stuff like that. So I'm using my intuition. But all these people that come to me, they've had interesting experiences too. So I just know there's something our current way of understanding reality is not helping us with. And I feel like we're at a juncture point, a point now where we're opening up to exploring reality more. And that's why I think this piece that I wanted to talk about tonight, I want to put it in there. I want to put it in the pile so that when we start looking at the reality of the UFO phenomena, we can, look at this piece too that I'm going to present tonight.
Okay, now for people who maybe aren't that familiar with the UFO world, the Hudson Valley had a big, huge flap that went on for many, many years. So you were in that area there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a question for you related to the experiencer thing. A lot of what you'll see today is people will still say, they're interfering with us. People don't have any rights. They're being taken against their will. This PTSD thing. So how do you deal with, for example, how do you deal with PTSD? Someone who believes that they're a victim and it's a very traumatic thing. You've dealt with a lot of these people as somebody who's educated in and got a background in this. How do you deal with this PTSD thing and this victimization thing that people want to promote?
I love Ray Hernandez's research.
Yeah.
He went out and he looked at thousands of people all across the globe. And what he found is that the people that still had the most traumatic experience and felt it was most traumatic had the least amount of encounters. The people who had more encounters, it got less and less traumatic for them as they got sort of acclimated to the reality, let's say, as they sort of lost their initial fear at the crazy differentness of what they were experiencing. And so I like to present his research to people and say, there's a whole bunch of people out there that have had these crazy experiences that we can't help explain. And that's why I want science to get on board and to start looking at the nature of reality to help explain this. But right now, we don't know. But I can tell you that if you deal with this, if you process it, and if you're open up just a little bit to thinking about it as like a wonder, let's say, then the fear starts to reduce. And so maybe we could go into a guided imagery where we're looking at things maybe from a slightly different perspective. One of the things that I've learned, Grant, is that reality is different depending on the state of your consciousness. So if you're in a state of fear, the whole world looks fearful. And if you can get into a different state of consciousness, those blinders come off and you can see the world in a different way.
Wow, it's pretty bizarre. I'm actually writing a book about this now, so it's kind of a synchronicity that you're using this thing about the nature of reality, because a lot of people will put it down as aliens or paranormal phenomena or whatever, but when you come right down to it, it's basically sort of an indicator that what Deepak Chopra used to call naive reality, that what we believe is really not true, and that what we're seeing. And this is sort of giving us these little hints of saying, no, it doesn't work that way. And the more we explore, the more we see that it's sort of a grand universe that's even I referenced the Mike Clellan thing. I don't know if you had encounters with Mike Clellan, where he does his regression with the owls, and he gets the regressionist asks him about the owls. What's the thing with the owls? I've had all these owls in my life. They followed me around, and then he immediately goes into almost like a channeling thing when he's under regression. He said the owls don't mean anything. The owls aren't important. The owls are just a symbol. The owls are a symbol that are tacked to a door. It's the door that's important. If you open the door, you realize that there's this massive universe behind there that is wonderful and all these unknown things. And that's the whole idea. Is it's almost like these things are to drag you to the door to get you to open the door and realize it's not the world you thought it was.
That's right. Grant, there's a book called The Kabbalion, and it's a bunch of Hermetic wisdom, which is ancient stuff. And in the Kabbalion, it teaches that there's 3 planes of reality. There's the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. And each of those 3 great planes are divided into 7, and those 7 are divided into 7. And it's all about vibration, and it's all about consciousness. And so it's all vibrating at different levels. And so what they're saying is that beings exist on each of those planes, and that if we can put our consciousness on those planes, we can be in communication with the beings there. And so they just kind of say there's like a million, beings in all different kinds of ways, because reality is really these levels of vibratory rates of our consciousness.
It's very, very bizarre, the synchronicities. I was actually writing this afternoon a chapter on vibration, on the whole thing of the colors of Michael Newton. If you're familiar with Michael Newton, the color of the souls matches the color of the wavelengths of color, going from low frequency to high frequency. And so it's amazing that you're sort of hitting these synchronicities of things that I was actually working on. In fact, I just posted, if you go to my Facebook site, I just posted maybe an hour ago Edgar Casey's famous line, or first of all, I put 2 of them together. One was John Wheeler, who said, I am 100% in the agreement that the entire universe could be a figment of the imagination. And then beside that, I put Edgar Casey. The spirit is the life, the mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. And there's these 3 planes that you're talking about. So it's kind of bizarre how I'm posting this and you're talking about it. So maybe I'll get you. Have you written about this? About no, you have to, because I would love to see your stuff, because that's how I was spending the last couple of days is looking to see what people have written about this vibration and reality. And I think you are one of the few. Ray Hernandez talks about it, I talk about it, and now I hear you're talking about it. It's this different thing. It's the nature of reality. What's reality all about? All this other stuff is just like sort of sideshows that get your interest and get you involved. Now, the last question, and then we can maybe sort of move on to what we want to talk about with the rainbow bodies, is as a sort of a counselor. I had an experiencer group that I started here called Experiences Anonymous. And basically what I found often is that you get this situation where people see themselves as victims when they had their first experience, or they haven't had many. And once they've had regressions and they sort of understand what's going on, they suddenly become messiahs. So they go from victims to messiahs, and you can't shut them up. They're out there and they figure like they've got a message for the world. Do you think that there is actually a plan, that this is what this whole experience thing is about, that these people are expected to sort of tell their story, to raise consciousness? Or what do you think is actually going on in terms of why are these people having these experiences?
I look at it as we truly are going through a shift, an energetic shift as a whole planet. One of the basic things when I have some of my classes, I say, when I was in school a million years ago, here's the sun and here's us going around it. And that was it. But I didn't realize the sun is going around the center of the galaxy, and the galaxy is moving in clusters of galaxies, which are moving in bigger clusters of galaxies. Like, holy moly. So we are truly becoming cosmic citizens, because we're seeing now how we're part of that much larger reality. And so I think literally as we move throughout the galaxy, we get aligned with and bombarded with different types of energies. It's kind of the idea of going from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And there's a different energy that we are literally engulfed in, and it affects the sun and it affects us. And so I think truly this is a particular time where we're at a particular space and time when energies are just right to lift our vibration. And so I think this is why all this is opening up. It's at the right time. We're all feeling it. And so it is opening our awareness, lifting our consciousness. And I don't mind those people talking about it. I mean, because, the whole Messiah thing, like, you get excited, you're like, I realize something. And, as long as they're not, saying my way is the only way. I love people, talking excitedly about there's a new vision for reality, because that's what we're headed towards. We're going to create that literally. And I don't think, Grant, that there's any one truth. It's the truth for the time period. It's the truth that helps us work with the reality as we know it now. I don't think there's any one truth, but what's the next truth to help us all on our evolutionary path? And so I think that's it. I think reality is shifting, our concept of it is shifting, so that we can grow, so that we can evolve. That's the kind of the world we're creating, so that we can grow to the next level, and reality will shift again as we move up and move up and move up.
That's exactly what I was writing again today. It's this idea. Bashar talks about, the alien channeler Bashar talks about that when you, whatever level you're at, you can see what's going on. But if you're not at that level, you can't see it. It's when
Right.
you raise your vibration, you get the, and that's what I think is happening. Because I know, like, my own experience was 1975, and it was very clear in 1975. This is very simple. It's extraterrestrials. They got lost, and they found here. And as you go along, it's every time we discover something that we had was wrong, and
Yes.
it just keeps going along. And then you get a situation like 2017, which I absolutely maintain would never happen. And that was, the New York Times does the article, and they said, "Oh yeah, there are UFOs, and the government's looking at them." And everybody went, "Yeah, I knew that already." It's like the consciousness had raised to that point, and that's what's happening. It's this little piece at a time, and as the consciousness rises up, we learn more and more about what the world is. This nature reality that you're talking about, which I think is extremely important for people to realize. It's got nothing to do with these little stories. It's got to do with the fact that we are starting to understand the world is not the world we thought it was, or as Deepak Chopra describes it, it's a world of naive reality, where everything is the reality is actually sort of is that there's everything is an activity inside consciousness, and that it's not the world we thought it was, and it gets more complex and more grand and more magnificent, and we're all contributing into this, creating the world, that we are the ones that are sort of creating the world and making the world the way it is.
Absolutely. And I can add in one other researcher. Rupert Sheldrake talks about the morphic field. And so the more of us who start talking like this and thinking like this, we're adding to this field, we're creating this field, and it becomes easier for the other people to step up, because we're kind of the forerunners here and we're creating it. But you're getting this field and this huge sort of vibratory realm. And so then it's easier for the other people behind, let's say behind us, or just later in the game, it's easier for them to get it.
Yeah, it's almost the idea that you were putting out, but it's the way I see it is that everybody has this idea. It's the left brain, small self, believes I'm separate from you. What I do doesn't affect you; it just affects me. And it's almost like we're changing to the sort of the female right brain world of oneness, where we realize everything is one thing. It's a verb. It's all connected, and that whatever you put into the field does affect the field. It's one field. It's all, everything's connected. And so your thoughts are very important, that when you have higher thoughts, it's like throwing a stone into a pond. It will ripple through the whole pond and will change everything. And that's the idea of us helping to move it, that we have to realize that it's all consciousness, and we're all connected to that consciousness. And what we do does affect the Gaia, does affect the world. And that may be why they're here. And it's, worried about nuclear weapons and stuff, because they realize that whatever we do here will vibrate through the entire universe. It's them as well.
That's right. Absolutely agree.
Beautiful. Wow, I'm very impressed, that especially nature reality, because you don't hear people talk about that, and that's all I call it the theory of wow, where I'm writing a book. Maybe Desta talked to you about it, the theory of wow, where in a lot of ways what they're doing is just getting you to go wow and trying to figure out, like, what's going on here. And the more you think about it, the more you realize that this is wrong, that's wrong, and this has to be going on, and we're getting closer and closer. But almost like I think it was Donald Hoffman talked about the fact that we will never ever get to absolute reality. It's always like we're looking at the desktop, or we've got a 3D vision thing on, and we're seeing only things in between us and reality. You can never really see reality. We're just playing with a desktop icon and thinking that's email, and that's not your email. That's not, and there's no garbage on your desktop, and we're sort of dealing with these icons and not realizing that reality is far beyond that, and that we're accepting these things as real when they're just sort of like transitionary things between us and actual reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I said, reality changes depending on your state of consciousness. So, we can only go to a certain state of consciousness at this point. And so that's the reality that is present for us. And as we keep going up, reality is going to change.
Wow, I hope you're right about some of this stuff, because you're on the same wavelength I'm on. It's like it's very strange that. So let's go to this concept that you wanted to do a PowerPoint tonight, and let's get going with that. And I'll probably have a pile of more questions that we'll go to.
Good.
And where do you live now? Are you still on the East Coast?
Yeah, I'm in Pennsylvania right now.
Oh, you're in Pennsylvania. Okay, because that's how I sort of started with my books. I did the Dr. Eric Walker from Penn State University.
Yes, I know.
He knew what was going on. So my friend is still there, and my co-author. So I'm familiar with Pennsylvania. And do you still go to the Ozark conference?
No, I haven't been there. And I think that was the only time that we went.
Is that right?
One time we were hoping to meet you, and
Oh, wow.
but I've been to, I have a lot of interest, Grant. So like one of the things I do is I synthesize my work. You'll see my presentation. It comes from a lot of things. So like I go into this for a while, and then I'll go to this, and then I'll go, but like I'll try to weave it all in, because I'm like you, I'm a seeker. I'm a seeker of what's going on, and I pull on these different threads.
And as you talked about, when you put them together, that's classic Ray Hernandez. When he came to me when he first had the experience, and he said there's some consciousness connection. I said, well, Ray, I'm going to be in Sebring, Florida. Come, and I'm giving a consciousness lecture. And it was 2 days later, he was on the Miami freeway when he gets stuck in traffic, and he got pulled, and he saw the wheel where they were spinning the wheel, and it was remote viewing and psychic phenomena and mediums and ghosts and this and that. And then he said, and you got to quit parsing it. It's all the same thing. So that's what you have, is you're doing the same thing as me, is you realize these are all components of the same thing, and they all have one sort of, you got to figure out how do these connect. And then you start seeing similarities where, people on board a ship will see 360 degrees. People in out-of-body experiences with 360 degrees. Near-death experience will see in 360 degrees. And you start to see, oh, maybe it's all the same thing.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Okay, let's get going with your presentation, and I'm excited to see what the work you've done, because you seem to be on the same track as I'm on.
All right, good. And interrupt me. Usually my presentations are packed full of information. So just interrupt me and we'll discuss it even as I'm talking, okay?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to share. See here.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to just adjust some things. There we go. Can you see that all right, Grant?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. So tonight, we're going to look at a couple different questions. And the questions are the attainment of the Tibetan Buddhist rainbow body, the transfiguration, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus, and the orbs of light people experience in the context of the UFO UAP phenomena, instructing us on who we may be and who we may become? Is the bodily transformation into a body of light the next step on humanity's evolutionary path? Is there a far more wondrous reality filled with intelligent beings who exist all around us? So we're going to look at this. We're going to highlight the remarkable research done by Father Francis V. Tizo, who traveled to Tibet and interviewed the disciples of Khenpo A Chao, a Tibetan Buddhist monk, who it is said achieved the rainbow body in 1998. So I'll tell you all about that. We will discuss the possibility that some of the glowing orbs that people report in connection to UFO UAP encounters could be highly advanced spiritual light beings. We will also compare the light body stories of the great Buddhist master Garab Dorji, who was the first human being to receive the transmission of the rainbow body teachings, with the major life events of the Christian Savior Jesus. So first of all, I'm just going to describe the research of Father Francis V. Tizo into the attainment of the rainbow body in 1998 by Khenpo A Chao, who was a Tibetan Buddhist monk. Father Tizo wrote this book. It's phenomenal. It's called Rainbow Body and Resurrection, Spiritual Attainment, the Dissolution of the Material Body, and the Case of Khenpo A. Chao. It's an amazing book. Father Tizzo, I call him a smarty pants. He's a brilliant scholar. He is currently a priest serving in Italy, but he is a New Yorker. He was born in New York. He graduated with a bachelor's in medieval studies from Cornell. He earned a master's of divinity degree at Harvard. He has a doctorate from Columbia and Union Theological Seminary, where his specialization was Buddhist studies. Father Tizzo speaks 10 languages, including Tibetan. For his dissertation, he translated several early biographies of the Tibetan yogi and poet Milarepa. He has led research expeditions and has traveled extensively in India, Nepal, Tibet, Thailand, Japan, and Bangladesh. So the research I'm going to tell you is Father Tizzo's own research. First of all, most people are not aware of what is a rainbow body. So this is one of the key points tonight that I'm going to be discussing. So I'm going to use Father Tizzo's own definition of the rainbow body, which is, it is the shrinkage and disappearance of the human body within a short time after death. It is accompanied by paranormal phenomena such as unusual emanations of light and altered atmospheric conditions in the locality of the deceased. There are various kinds of rainbow body which correspond to different styles of previous practice, including there's the complete disappearance of the body, sometimes hair and nails remain, and then there's the shrinkage of the body. Now, sometimes the shrinkage of the body is caused by an interruption of the process, such as when the deceased body is touched by someone. We're going to come back to that later. Shrinkage of the body can also be the result of a different type of practice technique and does not necessarily mean a lesser attainment. So here's the story of how Father Tizzo got into researching this topic. It was 1999, and Brother David Stendel Rast, who was a Benedictine monk, wondered how the rainbow body phenomena compared with the bodily resurrection of Jesus. Brother David knew that many Tibetans lived in Switzerland, so he asked a friend who also lived in Switzerland if he could inquire about what the local Tibetans knew about the rainbow body. 2 days later, he received word back from his friend telling him that a Tibetan monk had unexpectedly approached him and told him that his teacher had recently attained the rainbow body. So there you have some synchronicity right at the beginning of the story. Brother David is the spiritual teacher of Father Francis Tizzo. So in the year 2000, Brother David asked Father Tizzo if he was planning to travel to Tibet in the future, because Father Tizzo went over to that part of the world fairly, often.
Yeah.
When he found out Father Tizzo was leaving that very day, he asked him if he could go to Switzerland first and interview the Tibetan monk whose teacher attained the rainbow body. Despite the short notice, Father Tizzo took a detour to Switzerland and thus began his research about the life and death of Khenpo A Chao, a Gelugpa monk from Tibet who attained the rainbow body. Thanks to the Tibetan monk in Switzerland, Father Tizzo learned the location of the village in Tibet where Khenpo A Chao had his hermitage. Father Tizzo traveled to the village and conducted interviews with eyewitnesses of the death of Khenpo A Chao and many people who had known him and lived in the surrounding area. Father Tizzo was also able to read the written accounts that were produced within months of Khenpo A Chao's death. The following winter, in February 2001, Father Tizzo went to India and interviewed 2 young monks who had also been eyewitnesses to the phenomena surrounding the death of Khenpo A Chao. And this is Khenpo A Chao. He died at the age of 81 in 1998. He had been faithful to his purity of life, and he often spoke of the importance of cultivating compassion. He had the ability to teach even the roughest and toughest of types how to be a little gentler, a little more mindful. It was reported that Khenpo Chao was able to pass through walls and fences without obstruction while he was alive. So one of the things we're going to learn is that as certain people progress on this path towards attaining their light body, they are already showing that they have attained some degree of lightness of being. So he was able to pass through walls and fences even while he was still alive. Eyewitnesses reported that a few days before Khenpo Chao died, a long, flat rainbow appeared directly above his hut. He wasn't sick. There appeared to be nothing wrong with him, and he was reciting the mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, over and over. Immediately after he died, all the appearances of bodily aging, such as wrinkles, instantly disappeared. His face became youthful, like a young child. It was smooth and pinkish, and his skin began to shine. Above his house, rainbows appeared for many days. Sometimes they pervaded the whole expanse of the sky. Just before dark, light similar to that of a sun rays shone in the east for a long time. Two lamas who were with the Khenpo at the time of his death were uncertain about what to do with his body. They knew something was happening. He was starting to glow. They sent word to a nearby monastery asking for guidance. The Nyingma master, who was the head of the nearby monastery, told them, wrap the body in a yellow cloth and do not touch it or look at it for 7 to 8 days. Day after day, the eyewitnesses observed Khenpo Chao's body under the cloth becoming smaller and smaller. After 7 to 8 days, they removed the cloth and no body remained. Now, this process may have taken less than that amount of time, but it is uncertain because they didn't remove the cloth until it was about the 7th or 8th day. During this time, the lamas, as well as other lay people, heard beautiful, mysterious music coming from the sky. Sometimes it sounded like a voice singing. At other times, it sounded like instruments playing. They smelled a fragrant perfume, and no flies came near Khenpo's body. A few individuals claimed that Khenpo Chao appeared to them in visions and dreams. One of Khenpo Chao's students felt Khenpo Chao tugging on his shirt sleeve and telling him, practice well, meditate well, be attentive. And I want to say here, Grant, that one of the reasons these kinds of research studies are so moving to me is that some time ago, I think it was back in the 90s, I had a voice behind my right shoulder say to me, you know you're not alone. And it was out loud. It wasn't in my head. I've mentioned that I'm intuitive. I know voices in my head, but this was out loud. It was next to me. And I always sort of imagined, I've always been sort of a spiritual person, that if I heard an angel, it would be like, ah, this sounded like a New Yorker. I'm from New Jersey originally. This sounded like, you know, you're not alone. That's the way it's, and I've always wondered, who's saying that to me? So when Khenpo died, and he's literally, the lamas were hearing his voice outside of them. Many people have visionary experiences where they hear things inside that's not their own voice, but this Khenpo was speaking to them. And I'm not going to go into this experience, but I've also felt a being touch my cheek. So I know the reality is that there are beings that can speak to us and that can touch us. And again, as I mentioned, this level of the different planes of physical matter, and then you've got the mental plane, and then you've got the spiritual plane. Well, there's levels of physical matter. And so sometimes I wonder, maybe we're not talking about a body of light, but we're talking about maybe a body of plasma. And there's new research now in plasma physics. And plasma is considered the fourth state of matter. You've got physical, you've got water, you've got air, and then you've got plasma. I'm wondering if really we're talking about another physical dimension here that the body is going into. It's not light, but maybe it's more plasma that has some physical characteristics. And I just put that out there to you. I really don't know. But this recent research in plasma physics, I'm starting to pay attention to. So Father Tiso describes the time of the death of the Khenpo. And this is a very short little video I have a clip of, but I wanted you to get a feel for Father Tiso talking about this. So I'm going to play this little short clip for you.
This is the spot where he died. This is the spot where they saw at the moment of his death, when he breathed his last, that his face had changed. Now, within moments of his death, they see this luminous quality. The flesh becomes pink like that of a small child. The wrinkles disappear. So immediately they sent runners 50 miles to the west to consult with the Dharma brother of this Lama, whose name is Lama Akchuden, who was his brother in the Dharma and in the Nyingma tradition. What do we do? And he said, cover the body with a cloth, venerate it, do your prayers and mantras and so on, all the rituals. In 8 days, there will be a Padmasambhava ceremony on the calendar. By that day, you will see what you need to see. But don't interrupt the process. Don't touch the body. Don't expose the body. Okay, so they just did that. They could see day after day that the body of this frail elderly monk was diminishing under the fall. And there were rainbows in the sky, some of them of unusual shapes, like straight bands or triangles or trapezoids. And there was, at one point, a very large manifestation of light, a sphere of light in the atmosphere that was seen at a great distance. So not only by people near the hermitage, but by people at a great distance who reported about it. And there was mysterious, wordless music that could be heard. And as someone said, if anyone had a tape recorder around here, it certainly wasn't coming from a tape recorder. And also the classic sign of a very gentle rain, just called a rain of flowers. Okay, this scent of flowers. This is really just a fine rain that took place at that time. So they all reported in the interviews. I made a set of questions, a standard set of questions about what happened, and they all responded pretty consistently to the questions. Here we are interviewing Lama Piak and Lama Norta inside the hermitage over a cup of tea and some vegetables and so forth. This is the...
Okay, so now I'm going to weave in the idea of orbs that people experience within the context of the UFO UAP phenomena. This is the cover of Father Francis Tiso's book. So you can see the artwork that he has on the cover. This is actually a painting that is a portion of a mural from the Kelu Khan Temple, or the Serpent Deity Temple, also known as the Dalai Lama's secret temple in Lhasa, Tibet. That's where this image comes from. Well, you can see that there are potentially orbs in this painting. And I don't know for sure, but it looks like there are 5 men here, and they're doing a form of meditative practice that is associated with the attainment of the rainbow body. And if you see that there's these rainbows encircling these beings who are in orbs, okay? And I think these guys are trying to form their own rainbow body. But interestingly, here it is, it's an orb shape. And these guys here are helping them, for their own attainment of the rainbow body. You can see the rainbows around these orbs.
Any idea what the time of that painting was?
It's very old. It's
Okay.
it's old. So, you know, a long time ago. I'm not sure, Grant.
Yeah, okay.
So Father Tizzo met the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama practices some of these same rainbow body practices. And the Dalai Lama would say there's various mantras, meaning you say things over and over again, and you meditate on spheres of light. In other words, you meditate on orbs. This is part of the practice. And you visualize yourself as one of the various deities or bodhisattvas. Within the Buddhist tradition, a bodhisattva could be thought of like as a saint, let's say, in a more Christian tradition. Okay, it's a highly realized spiritual being that's usually very helpful to humanity. Also, there can be the experience of spontaneous emergence of spheres of light. In other words, while you're doing this practice, orbs appear. Now, it's not clear to me if orbs appear in your own consciousness or if these beings come to you in their orbs. That's not 100% clear to me. But I do think that it's possible that these orbs could be related to some of the orbs that people experience in the UFO UAP phenomena. And I couldn't believe it, but Ryan Bledsoe actually posted this in 2019, and I found it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is an actual image taken by Ryan Bledsoe and his family. He says this was taken in black with no flash. These are orbs. The orbs we keep seeing are emitting visible light. And look at the colors here. You've got the red one. You've got the blue one, you've got the yellow guy, you've got the orange, you've got the green. Ryan Bledsoe literally posted a photo that contains orbs in these exact same colors that's painted on this ancient mural. Here it is closer up, the image that Ryan put out on his Twitter. Well, I know, Grant, you know Christopher Bledsoe way better than I do. And I know your story of interacting with him and the dog and everything. But I'm going to tell a very quick summary of just a piece. You know his story is so long and complicated. But just in case there's anybody here who doesn't know Chris' story, because it's important.
Yep.
So on January 8th, 2007, Chris Bledsoe and his oldest son, Chris Jr., and 3 of his work associates went down to the Cape Fear River in North Carolina to fish. Chris went off on his own and saw 3 large orange balls of liquid fire about the size of a school bus, but it was hovering close to the ground. Over 4 hours later, he returned to the other men and could not account for the time that has passed. He had no recollection of what had transpired during his missing time. The following day, he realized he was miraculously healed of his Crohn's disease. Chris and his family have had many more unexplainable experiences over the years. And I know I'm leaving out a lot with his son and stuff, but just to make this shorter. On Easter 2012 at 3 a.m., Chris was in bed asleep and he heard a loud voice proclaim, "Arise." He got up, got dressed, and followed 3 shadowy hooded beings outside to his backyard. He felt like he must have been in some sort of trance. Looking up at the trees, a hole opened up as if into another dimension. Chris saw a large translucent bull gallop out of the hole and run over him, knocking him on his back. So it was a physical interaction. He rolled over onto his stomach and then pushed himself onto his knees to get up. Still on his knees, he looked up and he saw a beautiful lady floating above him about 3 feet off the ground. She was about 4 to 5 feet tall with blonde translucent hair and bright blue eyes. Her white sparkling dress looked Roman. Her feet were bare. She was glowing with a bluish white light. The lady told Chris many things, including prophecies for the future, which he has not yet revealed. She also encouraged him to start sharing his story in a bigger way to the public. And she said, "I will help you with witnesses, photos, and videos." And I'm sure you know, Chris has put his whole story in a new book that's come out this year, UFO of God. And his son, Ryan, who posted the video, the photo there, he has a wonderful podcast that he does, and he's so fun in it, and he's very smart. And that's Bledsoe Said So. That's Ryan. So back to this image here. Ryan also posted, my dad has thousands of videos showing interaction with orbs-like beings. The Department of Defense, through multiple intelligence community witnesses, has actual data that my father has an ongoing relationship with these beings that has never stopped. And then he posted the burning ones. Many beings do not require crafts. The deeper you go, the weirder it gets. And someone named Mortimer James asked him, am I understanding you right? That the orbs are the beings? Ryan Bledsoe, yes. Jimmy Church was had Chris Bledsoe on his show, Fade to Black. And Jimmy Church asked Chris Bledsoe, now we are getting into the zone of something spiritual, possibly religious, possibly extraterrestrial, just maybe it's all the same thing. Is that where you are today? And Chris said, yep, I agree 100%. They, the beings, came in balls of fire, not a flying saucer. And then Chris was on Coast to Coast. And a caller called in and said, do you think it's a possibility that aliens could take on human form? And Chris Bledsoe said, I absolutely do. I know for sure they can mimic or take on the form of a full-blown person to a translucently shadowy-like figure. And George Knapp, who was the host, asked him, I guess we don't know what it or they really look like, do we? Because they assume any shape that doesn't scare us too much, I guess. Do you know what they really look like? And Chris said, I think their natural form is light, a ball of light. Then I want to bring in and weave in Betty Andreasen Luca's experience that kind of supports this idea. Raymond Fowler wrote 5 books detailing the extraordinary experiences that Betty Andreasen Luca had with a variety of different beings. It started with the Andreasen Affair in 1979. Then he had the Andreasen Affair Phase 2, the Watchers 2, and the Andreasen Legacy. And just very, very short and succinctly, a little bit about Betty Andreasen Luca. Luca is her married name. So on the evening of January 25th, 1967, in South Ashburnham, Massachusetts, Betty Andreasen was at home with her 7 children and her parents, who were visiting because her first husband was in the hospital due to injuries from a car accident. Suddenly, the lights blinked out in her home. Her father looked out the back window, attracted by a reddish-orange light. He saw several little creatures which he thought looked like children in Halloween costumes. The next morning, Betty had a strange feeling that something out of the ordinary had happened. Over the next few weeks, she had flashbacks of humanoid creatures and an otherworldly experience, but it was not until 1977, when she underwent hypnosis sessions, that she began to piece together her incredible experiences. And here's a drawing she made of the beings coming right through her door. Soon after her father saw the creatures, they entered the house by passing through the closed kitchen door. All of the family except Betty was placed in a state of suspended animation. Betty wondered, how did they pass right through the closed door? Betty's mind frantically sought some logical explanation for what had happened. Then her strong Christian beliefs provided her a desperately sought explanation. Betty remembered, I'm thinking they must be angels because Jesus was able to walk through doors and walls and walk on water. It must be angels. And scripture kept coming into my mind where it says, entertain the stranger, for it may be angels unaware. The beings communicated with Betty telepathically and took her with them out through the closed door and floated her up into a disc-shaped craft. Well, there's a lot more to her story, but continuing on in The Watchers, which is the 3rd book in the series, there's a hypnotic regression that she goes through, and it was conducted by her husband, Bob Luca. She recalls being in the craft with the beings who had been abducting her since she was young. She asked one of the beings who they are, and they said, the Watchers. This term has come up in many other ways, but I'm not going to go into all that now. And she said they told her, They love mankind. They love the planet Earth, and they have been caring for it and man since man's beginning. The Watcher being also said they're preparing something good for mankind. They're going to come to Earth. The Watcher being told Betty that man is not made of just flesh and blood. Betty stated that the beings she met are able to transform their bodies into balls of energy and back again. And she herself had this experience of transmuting her body into light. It was a remarkable experience. She had an elder with her and a gray. They all turned into light beings as they went through a door to see what she called the One. Each had a different hue. The elder's light body was pure white. The gray's being body was light blue, and Betty's body was golden. Under hypnosis, Betty said, "Oh, there's such love. Oh, there's such peace. I'm just engulfed in light and blending into that light. Oh, this is everything, everything, everything. I cannot explain the wonder and beauty and love and peace." So both of these people, Chris Bledsoe and Betty, Betty primarily, we had these abductions. Again, how we were saying earlier, Grant, how traumatic was that? But they maintain that there's something spiritual to their experience, that there's something about light that's important. And these beings being able to transform out of light and back into light. And as I mentioned, is it light? Is it plasma? I don't know, but we'll just keep using the light reference. Now, I first heard about this whole thing about the rainbow body from researcher William Henry, who I really just love and greatly admire. And William Henry told me a couple really important points to our discussion tonight. And this was also, I found it in the Rigpa Shredra Wiki, an online encyclopedia of Tibetan Buddhism as well. But what William Henry says is that the Tibetans believe that the rainbow body great perfection teachings were originally of extraterrestrial cosmic origins, and they represent the highest form of enlightenment or spiritual realization attainable on Earth. According to the Tibetans, the rainbow body doctrine is taught in 12 star systems plus our own. So our own is the soul or sun, Sirius, Orion, Pleiades, Cygnus, Lyra, Vegas, Arcturus, Ursa Major, and others. People in the UFO realm know these planetary systems. People say they communicate with beings from these places. Here's the key point here. The Tibetans say that the procedure for turning this body into light is taught in these other star systems, that some UFO experiencers have had interaction with these beings. I think, Grant, that what this is saying is that we have cosmic cousins, that these beings have some sort of body that are energetically made like our body. Like there's a chakra system, and that if you start spinning the chakras, you can get that kundalini going and it coming up. And that is one way to get enlightenment, okay? There's something about the physical way our body is composed and the energy, how it's composed, that I think allows it to go through this, you might call it alchemical transmutation into light. I think that there must be beings on these other star systems that also have some kind of body that is able to also get it into light. So some of these orbs, I think they're saying to us, look what we can do, but look what you're going to be able to do. Because I think it is humanity's evolutionary path to get this body of light. And the reason is, and just very quickly, I don't think we're our bodies. We are our souls, and our souls are attached to these vehicles, and our souls need a vehicle in order to keep evolving because they're so highly vibrating, they can't come down to earth. So they attach in theosophical literature, it's called attaches to the causal body. It's like this body has all these subtle bodies, or a few anyway, and the soul attaches to it and gets all the information from every lifetime after lifetime, and all the experiences we've ever had are contained in the soul. And then this body dies and a new body comes. But once we kind of get the love part, once we kind of get the keeping your mind and your heart full of love and gratitude and joy, there's something energetically happens, and we speed up our vibration. And when we can turn our body into light, our soul then gets to continue its evolution in these higher realms that I mentioned the Hermeticists teach. There's many realms. So we're just going to the next realm, and our soul continues its evolution in this higher realm. And I think that it's possible that some of these beings that are visiting us are from these other places, but they've achieved this light body, and they've come here because somehow it's easier to transverse the solar systems and space once you have this type of body. So I've got another part to this, Grant, but I didn't know. I'm going to just stop there and just see if you wanted to say anything about that.
Very interesting. There's a couple of things you can maybe add to this. You're a very good presenter. You've got it very sort of spelled out. Maybe a correction. Betty Andreasen is actually 6 books now. I don't know if you've seen the latest book where she actually gets to go to the one. She explains what
that was her own book. That was her own book. She wrote that. She wrote that book.
Yeah, that was they self-published that book at the end.
Yes, that's what I mean. So I was just saying Raymond Fowler.
Oh yeah, Fowler's books, yeah.
But the Lucas themselves wrote the last book. You were correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's an interesting connection there, where she actually talks at one point about the blue, because they're promoting the idea that the blue orbs are evil and they're dangerous. And she had a blue orb that she actually said was her protector. The blue orb was around her all the time. So you have that. One of the things that I had got across, and that was the thing with the Michael Newton thing, where you're talking about the soul, where we may not be flesh and blood. If you're familiar with Michael Newton's work, he did the 7,000 people where he regresses them to their past life, then he lets them die and he takes them into the spirit world. It's a very deep regression. And basically what he does, this is where I was doing this color thing today, where he says to them, he said, okay, take a look at yourself. What do you look like? And they said, I'm a ball of light. And he said, what color are you? And this is where they go through the colors. So it starts very low. He's got, I think, 7 levels of soul development. The lowest level is white, then it's red, then it's yellow, then it's gold, and it goes up, then it goes blue, and the final one is violet. And so he said he'd only run into 5 people who were at that top level, the top level. And then immediately he would say to them, can I speak to your soul guide? He wanted to go one level higher. So he wanted to talk to soul guides of the people, these 5 people that he ran across that were violet. And I remember a case you might want to look into is Susie Hansen, who has written 2 books on her experiences with the Greys. She's out of New Zealand. And I remember her talking about the fact that she was on board the ship, and I think she was young at the time, 8 years old or something. And they said, we're going to bring your son. And she got all upset. She said, I'm only a little girl. I can't have a kid, and she was very upset. And then she said, out came the sun, and it was a ball of blue light. And she was playing with this ball of blue light, the sun. And then she mentioned the fact that her color was this violet color. And I went to her after I got her in the elevator. I said, I knew you were violet. I knew you got to be an advanced soul in terms of, so her son was blue, she was red. But you'll see this, and I think he has 7,000 people that he asked this question. And he basically states that that's our spirit body that we have between lives, and it's the color depends upon how advanced you are. So there was that I wanted to add, and let's see. Yossi Ronan also talks about this idea that um, I have him, and if you see my email, I have a quote from him where he talks about the fact that these beings that he ran to in Los Angeles in the 1980s, and he only had the one encounter. He wrote this book called One, the basic message that he believes they're putting out. And it was a best-selling book. He did fairly well. Desta edited it and put it out for him. And in that book, they tell him, they say, when we come to your world, we take on a body. We can take on whatever body we want. We don't need a body, but except that we have to operate in your world. You can do the same thing, you just don't realize it. And that's this idea that we believe we're flesh and blood, and yet our basic core may be this sort of ball of light that is our essence that stays when we die, and it moves on in the spirit world, and then we take on another character in the next life and take on another physical being. But our basic core is this ball of light. And even if you take a look at Chris Bledsoe, I often sort of, when I talk about people who've having experiences, the fact that they change. If you've ever talked to Nancy Tremaine had three different ones. The first, she was talking about reptilians, that the being was a reptilian. And then she was on board the ship 2 months before Betty and Barney Hill. And I said to her, well, so Mr., she calls him Mr. I said, well, Nancy, well, what did he look? Was he reptilian in 1961? And she said, oh, no, he was a human. He looked human. He was like, he had dark hair. He was sitting at a council, and now he's a light being. He just comes to her. There's no actual being, but she can communicate with him. And so you have one being that takes on three different life forms. And Chris Bledsoe, you're describing when he first had the encounter, when he painted the beings, he said the ones that took him in 2007 that were on board the ship, they were bluish green. But then when you saw them depending on the light, they would look brown depending what kind of light was on them. And they were 7 feet tall. And then when you mentioned this experience in 2012, where they told him to arise, and he encounters the lady in light who tells him, you got this burden, and you got to pass this message. That's your job. You agreed to do this, and you need to get busy and you need to do this. He said that when they appeared, then they were hooded figures, and they were beings of light inside this. They didn't have any sort of, he had a human structure, but no real faces. These beings of light. And I had an assistant, Sinead Wellahan, who was helping me do interviews, and she had an ayahuasca experience. And she said during that experience, these beings came to her with this ship, and they said, "Come on, let's go. Are you ready? Let's go." And she was so sick, from this ayahuasca experience. She said, no, maybe you can come another time. I can't come now. And they said, okay. But they were these energy type beings as well. And that, if you look at Ray Hernandez's list of beings, the number one being that is described is the energy being. That this idea that we are these balls of light is the number one. The grays come in number 3. I think the humans are second. The grays are third. That this energy being, that we sort of make this assumption that we are this physical body. But as Shakespeare says, all the world's a stage, all the men and women and aliens are but actors. They have their entrance and exits, and each man plays many roles. And when we die, we become this body of light, and we realize that our existence, as Catherine or Grant, was just a dream. And then in our next life, it'll become a forgotten dream. And or a lot of spiritual teaching, whether it's Paul Selleck, the basic thing is to remember who you actually are. I even had a psychedelic experience where in one of the 25 sessions, they actually came to me, and it was very clear. They said, don't you remember who you actually were? And because there's the Indian music was playing at the time, I thought, oh man, have I got an Indian background or what it is? But this is the thing, remember who you actually are. You are not the character on the stage. You are the being that is watching the play. You are the higher self. The small self thinks, the higher self knows. And that's this higher self that you're talking about, this ball of light. So I would agree with you that these balls of light very well could be beings that are moving around because they can come as whatever they want. And I can give you another example. When my father died, 2 days before he died, and my father was not skeptical, but he was not, you know, a woo type guy. He said to my mother, my father was here today, and his father died in 1956. My mother said, "Oh, really? So what do you have to say?" My father said, "He was just here. That's all you need to know." And he didn't want to talk about it, and that's the whole thing. So his father came, and if he had lived thousands of lives, why did he come as my grandfather? And the reason is because you have to be able to relate to it. If he came as anything else, my father, it wouldn't have meant anything to my father. But when he comes as the father, so this is the idea that we have to realize that we are not the physical body. The physical body is just as I was describing today when I was writing. It's a vibration. That color is all vibration, and that if you have the soul or God, uh, we are all parts of God, and that when you slow the vibration down, it'll become physical. And but the actual entity is not physical. Physical is just a low vibrating consciousness, and that when you're in the spirit world, people describe this constantly. And I don't know if you belong to the orbology group. We have an orbology group where a lot of people discuss this, where they show their various orbs and stuff like that. And it would be interesting for you to talk to these people and show this presentation, because a lot of these people clearly say that these beings are in the orbs. Or Chris Bledsoe, you remember you referenced the story with me and Nellie, where Nellie is bleeding, and he showed me the orb. I can maybe get you a copy of it for your presentation to add. Nellie appears in an orb. He goes to Nellie's grave, and an orb appears, and Nellie's in the orb.
I didn't know that part. Wow.
So this is the thing that we this is this idea of reality is what's actually going on, that we live in what Deepak Chopra called this naive reality. We think we're flesh and blood, and you know we die, and we're going to go sit on a cloud and with harps and stuff, and it just gets more and more complex. That they're sort of giving us these hints. They're coming in these orb type things. And when I first started, 1975, we had them on the ground, and we didn't even call them orbs. We did. This is a new development that is just in the last few years where it's really gotten into discussion of orbs. We called them ground lights. We didn't know what the word orb was, and we used to flash lights at them, and they used to flash back and stuff like that. And now this is, as you said, like the veil is thinning, and now you have this discussion. It's moved from wooden ships in 1896 to Foo Fighters in World War II, to green fireballs right after World War II, to the Adamski type crafts with the windows and the balls under them, to flying saucers. And now you don't have flying saucers, and we haven't had flying saucers with windows in them for like 40 years. There hasn't been a flying saucer with windows in it. And you see this thing that is changing, and now it's orbs. It's almost like they're taking us one step at a time through this process as they unravel this thing. And it's almost like they're revealing it to us one piece at a time. They don't come in and say, we're here to bring you freedom and democracy, Jesus and McDonald's. They're doing it very slowly, and they're trying to get us to figure this thing out for ourselves. But they're doing it gradually, and then you and I, and we all put our stuff in, and consciousness rises, and people start to realize that we're not at the center of the universe. It isn't flat. The sun doesn't go around the earth, and we start to realize there's a bunch of other stuff that we have that's wrong. And gradually we get enlightened, and we realize that it's this very complex world where we have these bodies of light, and that we are eternal, and that we're here for a reason, and all this kind of stuff. So I'm very impressed with your presentation. You're onto this is something that even in the orb thing I've described in this orbology group. I went after all the people with orbs, and we discovered there are patterns in orbs, and I say there are at least 1 million photographs that I know of, and nobody's paying any attention to it. It's sort of like, oh, tell us disclosure. Does the president know? When are they going to tell us that they're ETs and all this kind of stuff? And meanwhile, you have at least 1 million that I know of. There's a guy in Chicago that I know of that I just talked to just the other day, and I said, Jeff, how many photographs you got now? He said 250,000. And this is a guy who worked for Getty Photos, and he's doing orbs, and he's been filming these in downtown Chicago for I guess 4 or 5 years now, and he's got 250,000 photographs. And there's easily 1 million photos. I know a lot of people who have 100,000 collections and more. And so we're into this whole thing now, where we're starting to realize that we're being taught something here, and it's not just balls of light. There's meaning behind it, and I applaud you for going there and dealing with this this very important issue of orbs, and that you tied it into Chris and to the UFO phenomena. And I fully agree that you're right on the mark with what you're saying.
Yep. And you know what I'm going to do, Grant? I'm going to stop sharing because I have a bunch more slides, but I'm just thinking would take too long to show them. But I also weave in the idea of what we've been shown from Jesus's life, you know, because he had the transfiguration where he turned into light, and then he ascended in a cloud. There's something very important about clouds too. And so his life is also reflected in the story of this Garib Dorji, who is the first human being to get the rainbow body teaching. So like, you can see the rainbow body teachings and Jesus's life, they're both telling us the same sort of information, and there's a lot of similarities. Garib Dorji's mother was a virgin. A white man came to her with a lance, and she found herself pregnant. And often in Virgin Mary pictures, when the angel Gabriel comes, he's also holding a scepter. There's just so much synchronicity between these stories, but it goes.
Are you still there?
I can just stop sharing here, but I just wanted you to know that there's like even more we can weave in to this incredible tale of what we've been talking about tonight.
We'll have to do a part 2, and I'll bring in the orb people. I'll bring in the group of orb people. There's 50 or 60 of them, and I'm sure a lot of them would want to ask you questions, because I think everybody's doing the same thing, that we are people on the
Okay, stop sharing. Are you there?
Yeah, I can't see you. Hang on, you're stopped sharing?
Let's see.
I can still see your screen here. What's going on?
I do. Did I do something?
No, I think it said my connection is unstable, so I've just put it on the cable. I was on Wi-Fi, so it was
I was like,
probably.
I lost you. I lost you. That's a great conversation. We can't say goodbye.
There we go. We're still recording. I mean, this is excellent. Are you willing to do a second part if I get the orb people and we can maybe have them ask you questions?
Absolutely, Grant. I have a lot of material. I just didn't want to take up your time tonight.
No. Let's leave this one for now, and I've got maybe a couple of other questions in terms of your background, and I'll post this like on YouTube, and I'll also post it to the orb people, and set up another one with you where we'll at least I've got the background of the orb stuff, and then you can go into the next segment that you're going to do.
Great, I love that.
Beautiful. Let me ask you about your own experiences. I mean, have you had orb experiences? Have you had? Are you an experiencer, or?
I have a lot of interesting experiences, like all the time, but I wouldn't say I had anything like majorly. Like I said, somebody spoke to me, somebody touched me. I've seen things in the sky that were very interesting. But I'm not like a major experiencer, I wouldn't say. You know, I think my thing is I have a lot of really wonderful, we call them visionary experiences. You know, when I pray, I have really interesting experiences that way. But I wouldn't put myself in the same category as like an experiencer would.
What kind of spiritual practices do you do? You mentioned praying. Do you do meditation? And has it gotten more complex or bigger as you go along? Where, because you hear this thing about the hitchhiker thing, where once you touch the phenomena, it sort of starts to duplicate it. It sort of like attaches to you, and then you have more experiences than the normal person.
I feel, for me, I grew up Catholic. I don't consider myself Catholic anymore, but that's why I weave Jesus in, because I kind of know stuff. But I have a devotion to Mary. And that's my spiritual practice. I pray to her every night. I talk to her during the day. I asked her for help before today to
Wow.
meet with you,
Yeah.
just that I feel like I want to be her feet on the ground, her hands on the earth. I want to help her. And I feel like, she's helping everybody behind the scenes. And I just like to align myself to help her as much as I can.
So you believe you like, and a lot of people you'll probably run if you've dealt with experiencers. I mean, this idea of mission. Do you believe you have?
Yes, this is it.
This is it. There you
Tonight
go.
is it, Grant.
And I'm here to help you do whatever we can to move it along, because that's what it's about. It's about.
Yes.
I sometimes get the people even 2 nights ago. We actually went to an orb party 2 nights ago, and we were there, and they were talking about this thing that they're talking about a girl who's very psychic, and she said they said, oh, she's gonna get off the karmic wheel. She's not coming back. And I said, why would you not come back? It's like that doesn't make any sense. It's like, what are we going to do? Sit on a beach in Hawaii and drink Mai Tais for the next 12 billion years? I mean, it's like if you're on the Titanic and you're with your husband and your kids or whatever, and then the ship comes along and this rescue thing, and it says you can go to heaven and be rescued, and are you going to get on if your family is not going to get on, and your family is going to go down with the ship? Like, why would you not come back if people, your friends and your family need you? Why would you not come back? So
You were speaking the words of a bodhisattva. Remember I mentioned that term before?
yeah.
You have bodhisattva energy. A bodhisattva is somebody who in their soul wants to help humanity. They grow and they reach back and they help. That's what you're doing. You're learning and you're teaching. You're learning and you're teaching. You be the bodhisattva. You'll get to that point and you'll still hang around.
Yeah, that's or the expression is that you don't get saved until everybody's saved. It's like, why
Yeah.
would you leave before the last person gets rescued? I mean, you have
Yeah.
to, and
Yeah.
what are you going to do? It's like, it's almost like this idea, like sometimes there's this idea that God is watching what's going on. And I mean, if you're sitting there drinking, Mai Tais on a beach, or it's like, I love you, and you're to your husband and then your kids, I love you, and they say, I love you, and guy goes, this is kind of boring. I'm getting out of here. Like, like it's why would you fight to stay alive, and then to do nothing, just to sit there, and that's the equivalent of death, of being extinguished, where you save yourself and you whatever, but it doesn't make any sense. So I'm very, very happy, because you're right on the same sort of path that I'm on, and I'm sure these orb people are going to love you. But we were there. Now, what was the point I was going to make? We were doing this. Oh, yeah, it was this thing where this person said that they weren't going to come back again, and the person wasn't there, but we were doing orbs and photographing, and it's almost like different levels, because I remember it's a farm and people would film, and then we'd all go into the room, and then they have a big giant screen, and everybody puts their little disc into the thing, and they're on the computer, and everybody looks to see who's got the best photographs. And I remember I would have a camera, and we were using these point and shoot cameras, and I was really getting nothing, or I'd get the odd sort of black and white one, and then Destas are all colors, and it's like she's like it's almost like that idea that whatever you're vibrating at, you can see. So she's at a higher vibration, and she's picking up stuff. I'm at this sort of low, because I really wasn't into it, and I really didn't care whether I got anything. And then you get people who, like this guy from Chicago, this Jeff guy from Chicago. You see the stuff he's getting, and you're going like, oh, he's got beams and mists and orbs and just unbelievable. So and that's a world where I've been in this so long that I keep reminding people, you've got to realize this thing is changing. It is not the world it was 40 years ago. All the stuff that's happening now, the light language, the orbs, the people flying the ship, the crop circles, none of that stuff was going on before. It's like it's almost like the phenomena saying, oh, watch this, now let's do something different. And they're just leading us along the path of curiosity, because when you're curious in science, that's when you explore. If you're not curious, you're not going to do anything. So they want to get you curious. That's where I say, like, in terms of, like, whether it's cattle mutilations, or what I used to say to Linda, Linda, why they take the blood out, the last drop of blood out of the cow, and you do all these weird things, take the brain out without incisions? Because if they didn't, you wouldn't pay attention. They want you to go, whoa, this is so weird, like, what's going on here? and they're trying to get your attention. And that's what they're doing with these very sort of weird things. So fascinating. How many cases of these have we got in terms of documentation of these rainbow bodies? You mentioned the one.
There's apparently a lot. It's the Tibetans, the Buddhist tradition is broken up, and so then the Tibetan Buddhist is like a subsection of Buddhist, and then within the Tibetan Buddhist there's this called the ancient school or the Nyingma school, and then those are the guys that really do this rainbow body practice. So it's not all Buddhist, it's not all Tibetan Buddhist, it's just this subsection, but they do say that many people have attained it. Now, what is many? I mean, there was the one guy in 1998, and then there was somebody else fairly like recently, and then there was, but it's like spread out, years in between when they say things like that have happened. In the Catholic tradition, you have what's called incorrupt saints, people with incorrupt bodies that don't decompose. Even Paramahansa Yogananda had a body that didn't decay. And I think those are people who are just so close to achieving their light body that their body is vibrating so high in it, and their particles really aren't physical, and they're somehow higher. And then that type of higher particle doesn't decay. And that's why their bodies don't decay, because they are spiritually so advanced. Maybe in the next lifetime, they'll get their rainbow body or something like that. So there's traditions in other realms too that they talk about this type of body. Alchemists and hermeticists, they talk about like a golden body and a philosopher's stone. Taoists talk about like the immortals, the cloud walkers. So this idea of attaining this type of body is in other traditions as well, but it's not as like, I don't know, well known, let's say. It's kind of the esoteric, the hidden knowledge.
Yeah, well, you're bringing it out. I mean, it is true. It's almost like in the UFO thing where you have the Mission Rama, if you've ever dealt with them, a lot of, Latino Roman Catholics, where they're doing a meditation where they try to raise their vibration, the aliens lower their vibration, and they can open up these portals, these Zendras, and interact with these beings and stuff like that. And they have no grays, they have no reptilians, they have none of that kind of stuff. And it's almost like there's different practices, or Mike Clelland has his owls. And so in these different traditions, everybody's doing the same thing, but it's coming through a different lens of background. And it's basically the same, raising the vibration, and you have different names for it and stuff. And you see that in the UFO field as well.
Yes,
You mentioned the Roman Catholic background. I don't know if you ever saw my interview with Father Nathan Castle. So you're a psychic. Have you ever had any encounters with dead people, or because Nathan Castle, you have to listen to his interview. He's one of the more interesting people I've ever had. He's even got his own podcast, and he's a Dominican priest who just had this experience one time where he was got encountered with this guy who was sitting on the front of a car, and he's on fire, and he was in a dream. And so Nathan said, well, hang on, I'll go. And he goes with his prayer partner, and they manage to make contact. So he says it's not channeling. He doesn't want to use the word channeling, but he goes and he says to this guy, you came in my dream. And the guy said, what the heck is wrong with God? Like, why would he take me when I'm so young? And he was stuck sort of not in a purgatory, but it's sort of in a limbo thing where he's stuck. And he's had 500 cases of people who came into him in dreams. He's working on, I think, the third book now, but it's just fascinating. These different people who come to him in dreams, and the soul guides, they're not ready to, they can't move on. They can't move to the light or wherever Nathan thinks they go, but they come to him, and then they have these prayers, and they meet with these people, and they get them to whatever it is, they bring somebody in to help them, and they move them on. So Nathan Castle, somebody you should, because yours is the same sort of thing where you're using Mary, and he's using, I think, Michael. I think he's one of his. He has a number of different saints, and he has this spiritual practice as well, where And it's almost like a play. It's almost like you came in to run your play. I have my play. Nathan Castle has his play. They're all different sort of plays, but we're all doing different things. And in behind are the same sort of lessons that we're developing and getting people to realize the reality is more spiritual. It's almost like the physical world is just a low manifestation, and that it's all going to be, as I say, with the UFO field and probably everything else, it's going to be way less physical than you think it is. It's
Yes.
going to be way more spiritual than people think it is. And a lot of people, scientists, aren't going to like that. And it's not going to have any hint of capitalism. It's all going to be about people are here to help. They're
Yeah.
here to share. The aliens don't have any clothes. They don't have any food. They don't have any chandeliers. They don't own anything. They don't eat. They don't drink. They don't. It's like this idea, and the idea that it's going to be 1,000 times more complex. That when you go and whatever your symbol is, that drags you there. The curiosity, it drags you, and you go to the door and you open the door. You go, wow. You just see that there's more, and then you go to the next one and the next door and the next door, and it just gets more and more complex. And the grandeur of the universe and God just gets more magnificent all the time. You realize it's not the world you thought it was. It's way more magnificent than what you
Yeah.
thought it was.
And don't you agree that when you're on this path, when you're following that,
Yeah.
synchronicities happen all the time.
Yeah.
It's like the universe and you are connected.
Yeah.
You feel it because the universe starts helping you,
Yeah.
putting things in your path that you're like, how did that phone call happen? Or like we're saying tonight, like I'm talking about what you're writing or
Yeah.
whatever. Like synchronicities happen. I always say I love synchronicities because it means you're on your path.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
And
following your heart. You're following your purpose.
yeah, and that makes it curious as well. I wrote about synchronicities quite a bit, and I've had some really wild synchronicities. But it's the same sort of thing. It's the theory of wow is when a synchronicity, a really bizarre one, happens. You just go like, wow, and you can't let it go. And that's where you see like a lot of people who have near death experiences. You have people that have like 75 to 80% divorce rate because they absolutely are not. They're completely altered. Their life is flipped
Yeah.
upside down. And whoever they married say, you are not the same person I married. I
Yeah.
can't listen to you talk about this all the time. It does drag your attention and gets you to go. But that's
Yeah.
the whole thing. We have an eternity to do this thing, and it's lifetime after lifetime, and they're slowly moving us to shatter this reality that is not the reality you think it is. And you have your role, I have my role, and the way I describe it is whether it's the synchronicities, whether it's the universe, I sort of believe it's us because I believe there's just one thing. We are God, we are the universe, and so we are putting the stones in our path. But you have I look at it and say, you look at all the different lives we could have had, and I say to people, the average Super Bowl ticket now costs $10,000. And people will say, look, I went to the Super Bowl 56 or whatever, and here's my ticket. And I'm a really honored person or whatever. And you and I not only we get to play in the Super Bowl every single day. I mean, what more could you ask for? You could have been an untouchable in the streets of Calcutta and spend your day in a junkyard looking for something valuable enough to sell for food tomorrow. You didn't get that. You got to play this role of all these synchronicities and realizing the world is this magnificent place and this spiritual thing. And it's like being in the Super Bowl every single day. And I just try to keep gratitude every night to realize that I got to play this and this is my chance. And you got to use it because it's almost like they used to give you a day. If you got to live this day over again, would you live this day? At the end of your life, you get one more day that day, and you're going to change that. And you realize that you've got this time, and that you want to do stuff, you want to help, you want to. So I'm just honored, and to meet people like you. I mean, what more could you ask for? To have people that have incredible knowledge and stuff like I knew a little bit about rainbow body, but now I know an awful lot and the importance of it, why it's an important principle. So, today is another Super Bowl day where I get to watch, you in the Super Bowl. And so we just put it out there and add it to people's information. And that's, I think, what they're doing when they're giving us this material. We've come in our roles. We've agreed to do this. We've agreed to play this game, and the time is now. And we're doing whatever we can. And when it comes time to leave, we'll get another play. Or as with Anne Strieber, I always like to quote Anne Strieber, where Whitley Strieber's wife dies, and she comes back after she dies, and they write the book on life after death. And she says to him, Whitley, I'm no longer Anne, but I'll always be Anne to you. And that's the whole idea, that we get to move on, we get to play these roles with different people, and then we go on, we play a different role. And it's you couldn't ask for more. People just don't realize what they actually have in their hands. They're at a low level, and that's the way they are. You can't save them. You just put the information out and hope that someone sees it, and they get enlightened, and eventually everybody will be on the path and everybody be saved. But we get to play this, and I really appreciate having played the game with you today. And
Thank you so
learned
much,
stuff.
man. Like I said, I've been following your work for over 20 years, so it's really an honor to be here with you. Truly, thank you so much.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that, and we'll Desta will put it up, and you can post it wherever you want. And if you want to present this, I've got lots of places where they would love to hear you do your presentation, and we'll
Love to teach. This is my thing, I love to teach. So I'm thrilled that you'd like me to do it again.
Beautiful. And hopefully a lot of people will see this, and you'll get some other invites. But the orb thing, because we have this group that we started the orb thing, and it's a lot of people. Some people who actually will tell you they're from another planet. They are here. They'll tell you what their mission is. And when you see their orb photographs, you just go like, wow. It's like the different types of orbs. And it's just like a Super Bowl thing. And yet the sad part about it is it may not be the right time now, because in terms of the UFO community, they just haven't caught on yet. They think, it's dust, it's whatever, and they haven't seen the photographs, and that's fine. But if you want to look at the evidence, then you'll see that there's no way it's just dust or moisture or whatever, and that the time will come when that will be seen to be important. But we have to do our little part to sort of build the structure for other people to get up on higher up on the structure, and we do our little part to help to build the world.
Perfect. Yes.
Kathleen, thank you very much, and I will be in contact with you once I get this posted, and I'll put it on my my podcast as well. And if you want to do that second part, I am just thrilled to get that and the connection. And make sure you watch Nathan Castle. I think
I wrote that down. I wrote you guys down.
You'll love to see Nathan Castle. He's a fascinating person. And it's almost like the same as with you, where you see Roman Catholic and you go, he's Roman Catholic, or you're talking about this Roman Catholic priest who's doing the Buddhist bodies, and you go like, that's not Roman Catholic. It's like, but they have the open mind and they're looking for answers. That's where you're going, and you go where the thing is, and you still have your structure of your religion, whatever, but you realize that there are other people who may have answers and may be able to help you on your path.
That's right. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you again. And thank you to everybody for listening. And if you have any questions that you want to present, put them on the YouTube, and we will address those in part 2. Namaste.
Yes, namaste.